Chapter 6, Building Business Models. What is a business model? A business model describes how venture creates value, differentiation meets unique need, crowdsourcing to attract labor, disruption, and the sharing economy. So when we think in terms of that, we have these things, particularly when you start off with describing how the venture creates value. You have to understand, is it something that's going to be important to people? Differentiation meets unique need. Are you come up with a unique need, and how are you attracting people to work for you? Disruption and sharing the economy. Disruption is what some smaller company will do when they come in and they disrupt the business of larger companies because you bring in something that's actually better, cheaper, or something that's more popular. The four parts of a business model. Let's look at, so you're looking at startup. Is it sustainable, evidence-based entrepreneurship? Allow for quick changes. Scale as the model is validated. So you take into consideration when you start this thing up, is this something that you can continue? Is it something that you can get it to grow and it actually sustains? The goal is to be able to develop a business that can stand on its own legs and go for a long time. How? That's not based on how you feel. It's based on evidence. You look at the evidence and you do the data and you do your due diligence. And bottom line is, I'll say the numbers don't lie. So when the numbers start coming in, it's telling you a story. You have to be able to pick up on it, as well as talking to people. You're getting some information or intelligence about what people think and feel, and you're going to have a lot of changes. Expect that they're going to be happening quick, fast, and hurry a lot of times in the very beginning because you're just getting started. And the scale of the model is validated. Are you doing something? And the scale that you're trying to do it at is appropriate for your type of endeavor, or is it too big? Because otherwise you're too ambitious, and businesses fail for that reason too. So larger businesses are, when you look at the change, for one thing, when you look at larger businesses, it is hard for them to change because they are such big, large organizations. So it's hard for them to come through and make quick, fast, and agile changes and stuff because you talk about larger organizations. Having something smaller, being an entrepreneur, it's much easier for an entrepreneur to actually make adjustments on the fly. Advantages don't always come from the product. When we look at this, sometimes you see it may not come from the product. It may be the advantages may come from a better marketing strategy. Why is it that some people that you can find that there's actually a better product out there, but for some reason that product don't sell as one that's slightly a little less? It's because there's a lot of things you have to look at and take into consideration, but that's just one example of how that could happen. So when we look at the full parts of the business model, we look at the offering. This is, what are you also offering to the customer? Is it something that's valued? Is it something that has value to them? When you talk about the customer value proposition, that's what that is. Does it have value to them, not you? What do they tell you? What does the customer say? Is it something that they value? Is the value how much of the product is worth? And the value is how much the product's worth. Well, guess who determines how much it's worth? The customers. Even if it's something that you think that I should get $10 for this, if the customer says, you know what, realistically, we only see $5 for that. That's the customer value proposition there. And here's a great example of someone started a business while they were in college. So you look at Storage Scholars. This was an actual opportunity that started with a young man in college at Wake Forest University. He was 18 years old when he realized that he saw that a lot of his international peers were struggling to get luggage to campus, move it around on campus, whatever else. So he came up with this Storage Scholars to actually help them with that. Not only get their luggage and things to campus, but also put it in their rooms for them. And he started this out by basically just an observation and started talking to a few people. So he went around with no money, started putting out flyers out to folks. And he initially picked up about 20 clients that they said they were interested in this. This thing now has grown now to probably about 30 universities that's involved in it, but they have since been bought by a larger corporate organization, which is now helping them to do this type of operation to provide housing for people, when young folks, when they graduate college and they're starting their first job, Well, if they got to move from one state to another, this organization now, which started on college campus, is now helping them to actually furnish their place and get their furniture and get their things into their apartment in another state. So what he observed was a problem, and he came up with a solution for it. Something as simple as that. Customers, people are part of the market. Who is the most likely to buy? How will you reach them? How will you maintain them? So when they say the customer is always right, it's more than just that too. Who are you? People part of the market. What part of the market are you looking at when you look at this? Because you're not targeting everybody, but who is it that you're actually targeting? And what is most likely to, for them to buy? Who is most likely to buy it? And how do you get to them? Are you getting through them through social media? Are you using billboards? How are you doing it? Word of mouth? Posters and things you're putting up, flyers. How are you reaching this group? If you have the cure for cancer, nobody knows that you don't have anything. So even if you have a good product, how are you reaching the folks that actually will be interested in buying it? And here's the most important thing. A lot of people may purchase because they're initially they may be curious about your product. But if it's inferior, your product or your service, you won't maintain them. So you have to also realize is how do I maintain this relationship? Infrastructure. Infrastructure is your building, your tools, your people. All these things that come in that helps you deliver that product. That's your infrastructure. That too includes, like I said, the building, the tools, the people. If you got vehicles involved, if you're using laptop computers or whatever it may be, this is part of your infrastructure. And just as I was referred to earlier with Storage Scholars, they partner with shipping companies like FedEx and UPS, DHL. This is how they help the students get their stuff from where they live to the college campus or from the college campus to back home. Financial viability. You're looking at your costs. What type of costs you have associated with it. Is this something that makes sense? The cost structure needed to meet expenses. You got to generate enough money or enough revenue so that you can actually sustain and grow a little bit. In order to do that, you got to look at, are you bringing in enough to do that? Granted, it still may not be enough to be a profit initially, but that's okay. But you got to have enough to say, you know what, we're sustaining. This is financial viability. How much revenue we're bringing in. At some point in time, you should see the revenue going up. And like the operation with Storage Scholars, this young man had no overhead. He had no expenses. He went around and just started knocking on doors, handing out flyers, and eventually they just gave him money up front. So he was able to use that money and to grow the business. So he didn't have to dip into his pocket, and he didn't have a much of overhead either. So when you look at the customer value proposition, capturing the customer's value as profit, offer better than the competitor, be measurable in monetary terms, be sustainable. Again, the customer is going to be right. The customer is going to be basically letting you know what the value of that profit is. When it comes to what competitors may do, you got to offer things that's better than them. And then whatever you do, somebody's got to track the money. Usually it's someone like an accountant or whatever else to say, you know what, let's take a look at see what the money's coming in, measure the money, and see if things are coming in. And if also a financial person is probably going to have to help you with this too, if you're not financially inclined, is to say, what we doing, is it financially sustainable? Are we making enough to say we can make this, we can last for a little while, or are we actually making a profit, or are we losing money? So when we look at the customer value proposition, design thinking creates this. Think from a customer's viewpoint, because you want to think like the customers. If I was a customer, what would I want to do with this? How would I use this? Why would I use this? Why would I purchase this over somebody else's product? Demonstrate meeting customers' needs. One of the things too is when you do this, you actually develop a relationship with the customer. Either they trust you, they like your product or whatever else. But if you don't, then ultimately you find a lot of businesses don't stay in business. Uh, Here's an example of a startup entrepreneur endeavor that had a good, it sounded good, and it found a need. It was the Tata Motors of India. Tata Motors of India, basically in India, you had a lot of poor people who were socially economic deprived, and they worked on farms. They didn't have enough money to buy vehicles. So what they did is they rode around on scooters most of the time. The problem is, how do you haul a family around on a scooter? How do you get around in inclement weather when it's bad raining, all this, or extremely hot? How do you do that? Well, it's difficult. So what the founders of this company did, decided, I want to come up with a cheap car that's so cheap, cheapest car in the world, is so cheap that they can afford to buy it. And what he did is he went through and took out all the extras, the air conditioner, radio, took the windshield wipers down from 2 to 1, lightened the load as much as they could. And then they took some things that they said, some things that we were doing, there's some folks out here who could actually do it cheaper. So they subcontracted some things out. So they had people that were doing that. They also had people that can work on the cars out there. And these were people who were actually in financial need, so it was helping the community as well. And once they started selling the vehicles, something happened. What happened was people realized that it's too cheap. And it got labeled as being too cheap, and then nobody wanted it. So ultimately, now what this organization does now, if it's still in business today, what they do is they just make a few of these vehicles who are by special order, but they're not mass marketing them anymore. So what seemed to be a very good idea, found a problem and came up with a solution. On paper, it sounded good, but in reality, which gave them what they wanted, and then found out that the customers determined that, you know what, this is too cheap, I don't want it. Jobs, pain points, and needs. Understanding customers' needs and wants. And what does product do for me? Why should I believe you? Why should I care? Again, so understanding this is like understand what the customer wants, what they needs. Remember I told you, if the customers don't trust you, they don't buy you, whatever else, or buy the product, any number of things. But realistically, when you look at this, there's a couple of things the customer's looking at. Is this something that I need, or something that I want, or something I have to have? They don't just look at the product, but they also look at the entrepreneur. People won't buy from somebody they don't like or don't trust. It won't last. I won't say they won't buy, but what you won't find is sustainability. They won't buy over long periods of time because eventually, they won't do it because they don't like who's selling the product or whatever else. So when it comes to the customer can be very difficult to try to anticipate how they think. Over benefit is being a customer is big customer benefit. So when you look at that, you have a reason to believe an over benefit. You got a reason to believe you. Difference between you and your product. So we got an over benefit. We're looking at the this is real. Provides evidence to customers that you will do as you promise. That's your over benefit, that you will do as you promise. And they need a reason to believe you. The difference between your product and others. So if you have a product, it's like, okay, well, let me explain to you why product A over here and my product B. Well, here's the difference between the products. And here's why mine is better. So you have some problems associated with customers too. And these are the things that pop up. And these are pretty common that pops up. And that's why they're listed. Couple of problems here. Lack of time, improved service, reduce wait times, lack of money, delivering unaffordable products for less. So when you look at the customer value proposition, these are some things you have to look at. And these are some things sometimes that can actually be issues for something. A lack of time. If you find that, what a lot of people, they value their time. So if you have something that requires them to eat up a lot of their time which they have a lack of, and then and like long wait times, if they have to call in to order your product or your service, those are issues. It's been documented and proven that those will be reasons that people wouldn't come back. When you look at the unaffordability of the product, you think in terms of that, how that comes into play. And a lack of money is, delivering, Previously, what you said initially, what you said you're going to deliver them, you can't do it due to a lack of funds. But delivering unaffordable products for less, that's something right there. It's like, can somebody afford to do that? It's like, well, at some point in time, you have to also take a look at your profit to see, well, this is no longer financially feasible for me to continue doing. Here's some reasons people fail too. When entrepreneurs fail, sometimes it's a lack of skills. The endeavor that they're taking on is actually a good endeavor, but they don't have the skill sets necessary to make this thing come true. I'll give you an example. If someone was actually saw something that they saw something, an issue or problem, and they felt like they could come up with a solution for it. The problem is it requires a very technical solution, and this person is not a very technical person. So realistically, what they would have to do is they would have to find somebody who was to work with them on that endeavor. So a lack of skills can be a problem. Convert complex tools into products. Lack of access. Innovate and experiment to increase satisfaction. So when you have to convert some complex tools into products, a lack of access. These are things also that presents problems for entrepreneurs or startup endeavors. And innovate, experiment to increase satisfaction. This is where people fail to do this at times. They get to the point and they think, well, I can ride this out and, this is as far as I need to go. No, what I can tell you is a lot of organizations have fallen by the wayside because they could not innovate and they didn't experiment to increase satisfaction. Here's one way, when you're dealing with the customers, you convince others you have the best idea. And when you look at the CVP, delineates value of idea. So when you have to convince others. Realistically, if it's your dream and you came up with it, one of the things I found that entrepreneurs and salespeople are really good about is something when it's their dream and they're passionate about it, they can actually convince other people. Where you run into problems sometimes is with somebody when it's not their dream and they're trying to convince other people. People don't necessarily buy in as fast. Types of value propositions. All benefits promotes benefits of product. So when you're looking at all benefits, this is basically saying, I have product and I'm going to put it out here. Everything I got 10 different products. I'm going to put it out here and I'm just going to blitz and see what happens. Doesn't sound good, does it? And it's not a good strategy. Point of difference versus competition. And this is where, you look at your product says, well, the only thing I'm going to do to give me a competitive edge, I'm just going to tell people how mine's better than a competitor. That might be a good start, but that can't be all you do. Resonating focus on customer needs. Here's what you want to do. This is when you're actually focusing on the customer needs and not your product. Not blitzing the market, not trying to tell them how your product's better than the competitors, but your bottom line is, what is it they need? What is it they want? And then you concentrate on that. And see, that's customer focus right there when you look at that. Now, see, if the market, if you're offering this meets the needs of the customers, you like for instance, a Scholar storage. This is product market fit. You got to make sure you have a product market fit. Well, he did, because he went and talked to the students, the international students, and the people who had moved from far different parts of the country. And then they told him, yeah, I'll be interested in that. So he found a good product market fit. So when we look at the types of customer segments, we have the mass market with similar needs, niche market, and segment markets. So when we look at the mass market, this is a large group of customers with similar needs or problems. So you're really talking about a large group. Now, in order to do something like that, you're usually talking about when mass marketing, you're usually talking about a large organization of some type to be able to do that. That's hard to do that as a startup. Niche market is where you actually are catering to a specific group of people. For instance, you may be selling something and it may be a certain type of health food that you find that a certain ethnic group loves, and that ethnic group makes up the majority of the city. See, that's niche market. Segmented markets are divided into two. So this is where you may have similar, like two markets, but you're serving one. To give you an example, it's like uh, Uber. Uber has drivers and contractors, and then they have customers. And so diversified markets is with different needs. So this is when you have two or more customer segments with different needs and problems that are totally unrelated, and you're selling them something. So that could be two different, totally different markets and totally different, two different segments and two different markets that you're actually selling. And when we look at the multi side, you have two or more market segments, multi-market segments. And this is also, when you think about that, these are much more inclined to be larger organizations, not brand new startup endeavors. So when we look at the business model, four parts, you got 9 components: the offering and customers, infrastructure, financial viability. So the offering and the customers, are you offering something to the right people, to the right customers? You could have have the right offer and a good idea, but it may not be the right customers. When we look at the infrastructure and financial viability, those tie in together. The infrastructure, remember I said, this is your people, your tools, your computers, all those things, and your financial viability. Well, you have to look at your financial viability because something has to keep that infrastructure going. Is it something that's actually, the product is actually making money, but my overhead for my infrastructure is too high? So you could have a problem. Even if you are bringing in money, it may take too much money to keep you afloat. And at some point in time, you may close the doors because of that. So customer value proposition, customer segments, channels, and relationships. So we know what the customer value proposition is. So customer segments and channels. So customer segments is, when you look at the relationships that you have with these customers in these different segments. Are you providing things that they need? The channels. Channels are the way you go about doing it. How are you going about doing it? What channels are you? Are you using social media? Are you using billboards? Are you using telephone, cold calls, whatever else? The channels that you choose to use. And the relationships that you ultimately get to establish by going through the customer segments and the channels are vitally important. It's what ultimately keeps you afloat. If you don't establish those relationships with the customers and develop some loyalty from them, then it's very difficult to keep a business, sustain a business. Key activities. These are the things that you must be engaged in. When you look at the key activities, the things that you must do in order to get stuff out there. For instance, if it's you must do some networking with a particular group of people or whatever else, because those people are actually vital to you getting to the markets where you are. So you continue to do that type of thing right there. The resources. Are you getting the right resources? For instance, are you getting enough raw materials, a product, or whatever else it may be? If you're selling t-shirts, are you getting enough of those? Are you getting someone who's actually putting logos on them? Or do you have enough variety when it comes to resources? Partners are crucial because this is what you will have to have. You will have to have partners where you're working with, and these are people who will actually aid you to help you do your business. It may be, whether it be a bank, whether it may be somebody who's in marketing, whether it be somebody who actually helps you with your computer, keeps your books, your records, all types of things. These are all partners that actually help you keep the business going. Your revenue streams, this is where you'll say, if you have multiple products, then you may have multiple revenue streams. And if you have multiple revenue streams, then you want to be able to take a look at that, look at the cost structure, but look at those to see where are those revenue streams? How much profitability are you having from those? Much viability. And one of the things about having multiple revenue streams, it is very beneficial, because if one or two revenue streams goes down, the others are there to actually sustain you, so they balance each other out. So adding sections for socially focused organizations. This is going to be a lot of times you're talking about like nonprofits or maybe even government or something along those lines. Lay out and test your assumptions. when you're looking at actually going into business with them and doing opportunities with them, you have to also, lay out, but you have to test your assumptions, because what you have to do a lot of times with these organizations, you have to go in, you have to pitch them and let them know what you have and show them what you have and what it can do and what the market says and whatever else, and show them that you've tested your assumptions by virtue, if you've had it out there for a while. And so you've got things to show them how successful this could be. So when we look at the lean canvas, less emphasis on customer segments, begins with problem, addresses key metrics and competitive advantage. So when we look at this, here's what we are looking at from, we're not looking at the customer segment so much. We're actually starting with the problem. So we're looking at the problem, and we're going to look at the key metrics associated with that problem and your competitive edge. And it's kind of like working backwards versus starting with the customer. We're kind of working from the problem back to the customer. Adapted addresses startup needs. So these are some of the things that you would do early. It begins with looking at the problem and addressing metrics and competitive advantage. This is something you don't want to be doing later on. You want to do that early because it can help you determine whether or not you're going down the right path. So, and in doing this early phase, you're looking at problems and solutions. How are you coming up with the problem? Diagnose what the problems are. What type of solutions are you coming up with? You're looking at your key metrics. Unfair advantage is equivalent to opposite of like a fair advantage. If you have an unfair advantage, what we're really talking about, you've looked at the key metrics and you determined that, hey, this is what you're doing right here. You're going to have an issue with this particular, let's say a particular item that you need to actually make your product. So realistically, you're at an unfair advantage when it comes to getting that particular item, because you have to import it from a foreign country. You have to pay taxes on, and the turnaround time it takes a very long time. So it slows up productivity. So realistically, what I just described there is an unfair advantage for you and your business because of this one particular item that you would need to make your product so that you can get it to market and get it to the people. That concludes chapter 6.